夠啦，我哋恢復會議。而家首先請阿陳。
We shall now resume. Mr. Ronald Chan. Mr. Ronald Chan. Thank you, Chairman. The fifth outbreak has worsened and many industries are suffering. The $27 billion into the sixth Anti-epidemic fund, this is a proposal I certainly support. I appreciate the subsidy offered to frontline cleaners and security workers, and I'm sure they would be satisfied. However, the $10,000 fund would only be dispersed across 5 months, and this is a little too mean. For the tourism industry, for practitioners who are eligible for the first time, even if they switch jobs in the future, they would still be eligible. And I have no objections, since these practitioners might very well come back to the tourism industry later. But would the government allow or provide a registration regime for other tourism practitioners? As for the creation of another 30,000 time-limited jobs for a maximum of 12 months, the exercise includes posts from certain professional sectors, such as the engineering and financial sectors. I wonder whether more details or job descriptions can be provided. Barber shops and hair salons are covered by this latest round of AEF. Many barbers are self-employed, and they would split the income or revenue with the barber shops. If the barber shops could not resume operation, would the government consider providing a subsidy to workers at barber shops? For the question on barber shops, I would defer to Ms. Kwan, and then I would take the question on the tourism industry. On Mr. Chan's question, hair salons and barber shops were recently included as scheduled premises, and they have been closed from February the 10th. Since they were ordered to close at a rather late stage, the subsidy offered, like other scheduled premises, targets the premises that were ordered to close, and funds are dispersed to the premises operators. And the idea is to retain jobs by supporting the operators. We have adopted the same approach as with other scheduled premises. Like Mr. Chan says, if the situation worsens, we will certainly review the situation, and under the 6th round of AEF, we would include such premises. Mr. Chan, can you repeat your question, please? For the new time-limited posts, certain professional posts have been included. I'd like to know about the job descriptions. In the first 2 rounds, we included certain professional jobs in the engineering, construction, and financial sectors. Some of them were for fresh graduates, and training would be provided. So we would discuss with the relevant professions on the actual arrangements. Mr. Kent Lau. Chairman, the 5th outbreak started before Lunar New Year, and consumption was dampened as a result, and it seriously affected the business of many industries. So the $27 billion injection into the AEF is much needed for many businesses and individuals. So the disbursement should be efficient, and the application procedures should be straightforward in order to support the people. A one-off financial relief for the unemployed is offered in amounts to $10,000. So like I said, the funds should be dispersed efficiently. If the process would take 5 or 6 months, it would not achieve the desired objective. The government should offer a clearer picture to different industries. Even though the pandemic is yet to be brought under control, for the vaccine pass, which will be implemented on February the 24th, many scheduled premises want to see stable operating hours, and you allow restaurants to operate but not fitness venues, which is rather peculiar. Are you going to apply the vaccine pass to all scheduled premises on the 24th? And you did not reinstate the employment support scheme on a wider scale. Would more businesses close down as a result, and as such, waves of layoffs that could affect our society? I declare that my family runs businesses. They operate restaurants, kindergartens, etc. Mr. Yao? Chairman, we want to benefit both affected individuals and businesses. As for the overall strategy, I would defer to the Secretary for Food and Health or the strategy on the vaccine pass. Chairman, as the Chief Executive said, on February the 24th, the vaccine pass would be implemented, and the arrangement has started for Type B catering premises. Certain premises under 599F included new premises at a recent exercise, and some of these premises remain closed. From an epidemic control perspective, can we allow certain scheduled premises to reopen on February the 24th? For that, we would have to assess the risk levels. Some scheduled premises remain open, and unless we further tighten social distancing measures on February the 24th, the vaccine pass would be implemented. Mr. Lam Chun Sing. Thank you. The current round of AEF includes a temporary unemployment relief for individuals, and people can apply without having to produce MPF records. For certain industries, such as the catering industry, have not been included in Table 3, so they could only apply for the temporary relief of $10,000. So if they fail at that, they would not receive any subsidy. So many industries are suffering, and they hope to get a share of the $27 billion. For tourist guides, many of them have switched to other occupations. Others are working in vaccination centers. Meanwhile, the catering industry is also suffering. Most people were not entirely out of a job in the last 2 years, and they could find some work here and there, and their income levels returned to 80 or 90% of the normal levels, but now they are stretched again. for the temporary relief of $10,000, it will benefit. You said it will benefit $300,000, but at the peak of unemployment last year, 260,000 people were out of the job. For catering practitioners who were out of a job for a month or so, they were good as unemployed. So is there anything we can do for them?
For beauty industry, masseurs, they should be allowed to apply for the temporary unemployment relief. The land transportation has been dealt a severe blow. The bus operators, the bus drivers, perhaps these $2,000 for 5 months should cover these land transport sector. Mr. Yao? Well, indeed, we did address this question earlier, but I think it bears repeating. In this AEF 6.0, other than those sectors that have dealt a severe blow because of the social distancing measures, we also plug the gap to cover those who are out of a job for 1 month. Whatever sector you are, you will be covered. Mr. Lam referred to the point that in different sectors, whether it is full-time or part-time or freelancers or self-employed, they are included in the scope. So it doesn't really matter where they come from. If they are affected, at first this $10,000 would cover them. Pico? Yes, Secretary. This is not sector specific. As long as they fulfill the criteria, when they make the application, they're out of a job for at least 1 month, and their pay is no more than $30,000 per month, they can make an application. But I hasten to add that not every scheme can cover everybody. Mr. Lam is referring to those who are on no-pay leave in the catering sector. I did try to explain a moment ago. In this AEF 6.0, there is a sector-specific subsidy. When COVID becomes stable, the catering industry can stage a pretty good rebound. So in this 6.0, we are subsidizing the employers for them to keep the business on. When the COVID eases, they will be able to stage a comeback and benefit the workers. Mr. Dennis Lam. Chairman, thank you. In this Anti-epidemic fund 6.0, there is the temporary unemployment relief. The FTU welcomes this. During COVID in 2020, we did suggest an unemployment protection scheme. If the government did implement some measures, we would have been able to cover those who are out of a job. We would have been able to help a lot more people. I hope that the government will think out of the box. The members of the public need a fair system to address the problems. We've got some comments to make here. In the gas industry, telecommunication, electricity, escalator, lift, aircon, recycling business, the workers are working in places where they have a high exposure of risk, and I hope that they can be incorporated into the cleaners category and the security staff category. There are people who are gig workers. They are on no minimum pay. They don't have any annual leave, no perks. If they stop working, they go hungry. Now, the Kwai Chung estate was subject to a lockdown, and they couldn't go to work. In many private organizations, they're also implementing some measures. There are some places where the workers will be banned for a minimum of 7 weeks or 7 days. shouldn't there be some allowance for these workers if, these workers are underprotected, and there should be some allowance. For cleaners and security guards, the paper refers merely to the outsourced contract workers or workers under the contract of the government or the HA and the Housing Society. And there are some other security guards that are left out of the scope. There are many security guards and cleaners who do not stand to benefit. And the application is made in the capacity of the employers under the building management context. And many people are left out in the code. Shouldn't be broader measures to benefit these people as well. LWB can address the question, and then the FSTB can address the second question. Chairman, we did have some communication on different occasions, like the welfare panel and so on. I like to reiterate that if we want to have a comprehensive review of the retirement protection, we have to start with the cancellation of the offsetting arrangement. If we are to deal with a policy issue, we have to deal with the severance pay and the long service payment. I've got nothing to add. Any follow-up? If not, Mrs. Regina Ip. Mrs. Regina Ip. Chairman, thank you. I'm glad the government is acting swiftly. Since January 14th, the government talked about $3.5 billion. The government is shelling out $27 billion. This time, we're not merely dealing with the scheduled premises. We are here to deal with the freelancers, the unemployed, the underemployed, and those without an MPF account. If they have been out of a job since October, they will stand to get $10,000. I'm glad to hear from Ms. Doris Ho that things will be made very simple. Now we have nighttime dine-in ban, and all the performances have been cancelled. Now you said the pay cannot be more than $30,000. There are many performers whose work is seasonal. The government has tightened the social distancing measures, and prior to that, they were kept very busy with many parties. They had a lean time before that. Now, I hope that you will be more flexible with regard to the $30,000 pay. Second, the fishermen, some fisher folks are telling me that it is they are subject to very stringent requirements if they want to operate in the mainland waters. And the mainland deck hands have to be paid, and they have, they kind of resume work until March because of the moratorium. And the $20,000 offered to the fisher folk is nowhere near enough. Can this be ramped up? A31. The fishermen with mainland deckhands can get $20,000, and the fisherman collection boat can get $20,000. Can there be any overlap there between the two categories? FHB can address the question about the fisher folk, and the PICO can take the first question. Secretary, please. Chairman, I defer to the Director of Egg and Fish. Now, for the fishermen going to the mainland, the mainland has tightened up all the requirements. we have been liaising with the mainland authorities and trying to provide suitable support. Say, for instance, if they need to have a negative result within 48 hours, we have stepped up the testing for the fisher folks, and they also need to have the booster shot, and we've also facilitated the vaccination on the part of the fishermen, and the fishermen have been allowed to resume their business. We also understand that the fishermen are experiencing quite a lot of difficulties. So these fishermen who are operating in the mainland have seen their treatment on the same par as local fishermen. As to the overlapping category, now if they get $20,000 in subsidy, they will not be getting the additional $10,000. Pico, make it brief, please. We heard Mrs. Yip's comments. Like I said, we are helping those who are temporarily unemployed, and we will try to make it as flexible and liberal as possible. There are some members who make comments about the time distribution. We allow members 4 minutes. Sometimes I wouldn't cut the officials off mid-sentence because what they say will be useful to other members. If they go over 4 minutes, I will not bring in another official, because if they go on like this, then it will not be fair to those members who observe the time limit. So you might wish to spend 2 minutes for your question and allow 2 minutes for the officials. I wouldn't cut them off mid-sentence, but I hope that the officials will not repeat what you have already said or what you have already done. Please be focused in your reply. Whether you're going to do it or whether you're not going to do it, please say so. Mr. Tang Fei, 4 minutes, please. Chairman, thank you. First of all, for the government to roll out the 6th round of AEF so swiftly, I welcome that, and they have taken on board a lot of suggestions from the FEW, like the support for the private school-like buses and so on. Now we have 100 to 200 private kindergartens in Hong Kong. Over the past 2 years, they have been struggling, and the parents would take their kids out of the kindergarten because they cannot attend schools because of COVID. They're struggling to pay the rent. They're struggling to pay the salaries. And will the government consider this? Now, for these private kindergartens, will you consider doing the same thing of A17? You work on the basis of the enrollment in January, and each student, for each student, they should get $2,000 in subsidy for them to go on operating, and also to keep the kindergarten teachers, so that we will not be losing these teachers. Also, in this paper, there is the interest-free deferral of loan repayment for the tertiary institutions or self-financing post-secondary institutions and the students. In Appendix B, page 5, I don't quite understand. For these self-financing post-secondary institutions, if they experience difficulties in 2018-2020, there were cases of deferral in payment. On page 6, it says that the Education Bureau will be inviting all these institutions to let the government know whether they need to have the deferral for 2 years, Is it the case that this will benefit all self-financing post-secondary institutions, or do you have to assess whether they have the financial capability before you allow them to do so? Mr. Yao, I defer to the Education Bureau. Right, on Mr. Tang's question about the kindergartens, we heard what Mr. Tang has to say. We have the subsidy anything between $60,000 to $600,000 for the self-financing post-secondary institutions. Basically, there will be automatic deferral of the loan payment. There are some who would like to make the payment according to their schedule, and they don't need to have this deferral arrangement. Thank you. Mr. Tang, any follow-up? Nope. Right. Mr. An Banyu. Chairman, thank you. Chairman, I'd like to pick up on the issue of the temporary unemployment relief. I'd like to take it up with PICO. Now, PICO said that if people don't have the MPF evidence, there can be a declaration. I don't think this is a feasible proposition. During COVID, many NGOs are responding to the SWD to keep staff members at home for work, and they don't deal with these kind of applications. Now, these NGOs are serving their members only. Non-member applicants simply will not be entertained. I hope that the PICO will have regard to the declaration system under the WFA. If they are unemployed for more than a month, they can sign this declaration and mail it to the PICO as part of the application. I think that would be far more efficient, and there is no need for them to go through the NGOs. So what is the administrative cost on the part of the NGO? There are many people who are underemployed, and I hope that the government should take advantage of the working family allowance and reduce further the working hours threshold and increase the WFA. Right, PICO. Chairman, if I may explain a little bit more about the application form, whether you have an MPF account would be the same, and the whole idea is to make it simple. We are asking for the fundamental information, the name, ID number, the contact number, mobile number, and the bank account number. So it doesn't matter whether one has the MPF account. You can make a declaration, and you file an application that you are unemployed. Now, this is the obligation of the applicant. I think this way we can avoid any abuse, because making a declaration will carry legal liability. We hope that most of the applicants would have an MPF account, and we can use the MPF account information to verify the eligibility, and we can disperse the funding as soon as possible for these people. Like Mr. An said, some do not have any MPF account, and they can make a declaration. And I suspect that there may be a lot of self-employed people. And how can they prove that they were without any income over in the recent past? And this is not something that can be dealt with under a computer system. So the HAB will hire two NGOs to handle the applications. Now, Mr. An, you can rest assured that the HAD is in communication with us Well, I've got a couple of seconds. What about the administrative cost incurred for the NGOs? I defer to the HAB. HAB, make it brief, please.
We are now discussing it with the relevant organizations. Let me do it this way. A lot of members' questions get unanswered. I hope that the government officials please pay special attention. After the meeting, you can call up the relevant colleagues and answer their questions, or you can reply to them in writing. And members, if you have not been able to ask a question, I think you are duty-bound to approach the relevant policy bureaus to get the correct answers. So, well, let's communicate more with the relevant policy bureaus. Next one, Mr. Edward Lau. Thank you, Chairman. I have a few simple questions. A lot of Hong Kong people have been asking this. You have heeded our views and you are rolling out the TUR. After that, will there still be the consumption vouchers to be distributed? Secondly, what is the definition of unemployment? A lot of fellow members have asked this. Some people now are staying in their job but without pay. And some companies have asked them not to come back to work for the time being. No, they are without an income. So how would you handle these people? Can I defer the FSDB to take the first question and Pico the second question? FSDB? Am I coming through, Chairman? Yes. Work staying in the job without pay. Well, that's not the question that you are going to answer. Well, the question is after receiving the TUR, will there still be consumption vouchers to be distributed? Thank you, Chairman. On the question of consumption voucher, I think it's just a suggestion by some people. It's not a policy. We have heard your views, and we will relay the same to the FS for his consideration. Thank you. HAB? I'm from PICO. Mr. Lau referred to staying in the position without pay. While the TUR, we would like to concentrate our resources to the most needy, the unemployed, those without a job. Well, what the group that you are referring to is that they still have the job position, but because of the epidemic, they are required to take leave for the time being. So this is not a group that we are targeting this time. Since the employers are still keeping the employment relationship with the employees, maybe the employers are hoping that the pandemic can stabilize and business can come back. And by then, the employees can continue with their work. Don't you know that now some people have suspended work for 3 months, 6 months, even 1 year, and they keep their positions, but they're not being paid. So maybe sometimes I advise them to, well, should we advise them to quit or what? Because some of them have stopped working or suspended work for a long time. Head of PICO, please. Our present program really is targeting people who are affected by the fifth wave. And well, applicants have to be out of job for at least 1 month when they apply for the TUR. Now, the member mentioned about people out of job for 1 year, and the unemployment rate has dropped from 7.2% to 3.9%. well, there has been a drastic decline in the unemployment rate, and there are, in fact, many jobs on the market, and we have even heard employers telling us that they cannot hire enough workers. So I may consider your suggestion, but I don't think we should take care of this group of people here in this present exercise. Mr. Perry Yu. I would like to thank fellow members for speaking out for the tourism sector. The fifth round was launched very quickly, and the sixth round is also being rolled out most swiftly, and I appreciate that. For the 5.0 exercise, we have received funds very swiftly, and many of our practitioners received the funds before the Lunar New Year. The Tourism Commission has been doing a very good job. And for the sixth round, I hope that you can still be quicker. You must distribute funds to the needy enterprises and individuals. For the fifth round, well, there's been some help. And then for the latest round, the sixth wave, I think the help is really minimal. And in the next 6 months, we don't see business coming back. So the sector hopes that the government can launch a special ESS for our sector and also roll out many more short-term time-limited posts to hire practitioners from the sector in doing anti-epidemic work. I hope that the government can respond to our request. Now, hotels are covered under the latest round. Well, $300,000 to $400,000 will be dispersed depending on the number of rooms. But there's no support for anti-epidemic hotels. They are at the front line of the anti-epidemic efforts, and their business has been affected severely, and the occupancy rate is only 10 to 20%. I hope that they can be covered. Other members have talked about other gaps in your plan. I hope that the government take a good look at the entire tourism chain, whether it's the airplane companies, exhibition and sector, and cross-boundary travel workers and so on. I hope that the government can take a good look, a comprehensive look, and cover all these other groups as well. Thank you, Mr. Yu, for your comments. First, we all agree that the tourism sector is particularly hard hit, and our support is greater than for the other sectors. And we are giving out around $4 billion in total to the tourism sector in 7 rounds. And subsidy is not only given not only to the enterprises, but also the individuals. And we also encourage the sector to transform and upgrade themselves, say, for example, by offering green tourism, and also ask the travel agents to launch the holiday at home and spend to redeem program, etc. I know that over half of the travel agents have launched or offered such programs, and hopefully they can be helped to stay afloat. And in the long term, they can diversify into new modes. So on this front, we will continue to discuss with Mr. Perry Yu. Hotel is mentioned. This time round, hotels and guest houses are also subsidized. And some of the hotels have been very helpful. They have served as quarantine hotels. And we have a sort of guarantee arrangement for them. Well, this 50% is only 50%. Well, 50% occupancy rate is guaranteed. On average, I know that the occupancy rate is 60% across the trade. So if they don't have enough clients, we'll make sure that they will get funding from the government amounting to rental for 50% of the rooms. Ms. Eunice Young, for the 27 billion AEF, we are all for it. I think the government has acted swiftly, but I have to make several points for the government to consider. The first, everyone is concerned about unemployment, underemployment, and also a drop in salary among employees. So, Ms. Young, so can you also switch on your video function as well? I've already turned it on. Yes. First point. Can I? Should I start all over again? Yes, we've heard you. It's just that we didn't see your face. Okay. For unemployment, the government should consider covering those who have their salaries cut. We have received a number of views at the district, and for groups directly or indirectly affected. For those directly affected, they are almost all covered under the AEF. And for those indirectly affected, for example, the food supplies for restaurants, tutorial personnel, but they are not in the tutorial centers, and also auditors, SMEs. They think that they are not covered under AEF, especially the small and medium-sized auditing firms. Because of the epidemic, they cannot go to the mainland to do auditing for listed companies on the mainland, and they have a tough time. Last night, I have talked to my voters, and they are very concerned about how to revive or relaunch business for certain sectors like tourism. And the AEF can help them tide over difficulties for a few months, but in the longer term, they are still suffering. So how can you help them transform and upgrade themselves? And how can they still maintain business during the epidemic? The government must be determined and devote the resources to help them. Well, please help the tourism sector, which is now in deep water. Let me respond to the question on tourism. We're not just directly subsidizing them. We are trying to create business for them. For example, we are helping them to promote green tourism, and 2 rounds of $1 billion or $100 million have been dispersed. And in the last round, an additional $300 million has been dispersed to help them. And through the tourism board, we have helped them launch the Spend to Redeem program, Holiday at Home program, etc. The day before yesterday and last week at the panel meeting, we have talked about mid- and long-term development plans for the tourism sector. I think we have forged a consensus with the sector. Mr. Ronick Chen talked about registered travel agents in the next and in the upcoming round of AEF. Well, the newly registered travel agents will be included in the program. So this goes to show that there has been upgrading within the sector. What about SMEs? Sorry, you've gone over time. Mr. Zhao Qiuchong. Thank you, Chairman. I appreciate the government's swift efforts to launch AEF 6.0. I must compliment the government for heeding the labor sector's views and launch a TUR targeting the unemployed. Overall, I hope that the government can adopt a more lenient approach in implementing the relief program so that more unemployed people can benefit. I have several suggestions or comments. First is about the catering sector. I noticed that Professor Sophia Chen was here. Well, we must thank you, Professor Chen. There have been five waves of outbreak, and every time when you do your anti-epidemic work, the first sector you target is the catering sector. Workers cannot work anymore, but in the sixth round of AEF, why don't you give the catering business workers $2,000 as well? Doris Ho said that the catering business can rebound very quickly. That's not the case. Before the fifth wave, it looked as if the catering business has picked up again. Well, but the business has never gone back to what was before the epidemic. In January, well, the workers worked only half-time because there was the evening dine-in ban. So can the government consider helping the catering workers? And then for drivers in public transport, they have to come into contact with over 1,000 passengers every day, and they're in a high-risk trade as well, and their salary has been cut by around 1/3. So I hope that the government can consider helping these workers. First FHB, followed by THB. Thank you, Chairman. In the previous rounds of AEF, every time we were giving substantial support to the catering business. For the fifth round of AEF, we have disbursed over $14.8 billion to the catering sector. This is a high-risk trade. So from the perspective of controlling the epidemic, we have to do what we did. So subsidy to the catering business takes up a high percentage of the AEF. We hope that business in the catering sector can go back to normal as well as soon as possible. And we hope that we can relax the restriction measures as soon as possible. But depends on the development of the epidemic as a whole. Well, your time's up. Your question for the THB, maybe Mr. Frank Chan can call you and liaise with you. Mr. Lam Chi Yun. Next. Professor Nelson Lam. He is not here. Dr. Tan Yue Hang. Oh, thank you. Yes. Yes. Yeah, you can speak. Is it my turn? Yes, we hear you. Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Secretary. I have several questions. What about the retail sector? Well, retail sector, there are 250,000 employees, and there are 45,000 SMEs in that sector. Well, they are not directly affected, but they have indeed been dealt a blow. I think there is a need for you to consider supporting the retail sector. Well, since the onset of the epidemic, there has been a change in the retail format. The retail sectors have been opening online shops. So I hope that you can render support to them, help them transform their business.
And this would facilitate the development of the e-commerce market as well. This is my first point. Secondly, for schedules ordered to close, they are receiving support. Some businesses were ordered to close and they received subsidy under the scheme. But what about their downstream operations? For example, when beauty salons are ordered to close, the suppliers of beauty products are also affected. For restaurants were ordered to close, so their suppliers were also affected. So did you consider covering these businesses in your scheme? That is downstream businesses who were also affected. My third point is that in terms of the flat rate of $30,000, for families receiving the $30,000 subsidy, some people make more than $30,000 a month, but some other family, their plight could even be worse and compared with those who are eligible for the $30,000. So in terms of the threshold of $30,000, did you consider the overall circumstances of different families? I'd like to talk about the $2,000 subsidy per month for frontline workers. These are people at the forefront of the anti-epidemic work. While they shoulder the risks of inspection and they are risking their health, so we ought to give them support, and these include testing workers, carers, property management staff, as well as media workers at the front line. So $2,000 a month for 5 months. They will receive $10,000 in total. These are people at the front line of our anti-epidemic work. They deserve more. I think $2,000 per month is too little for them. Secretary, thank you very much, Mr. Tan. In terms of our anti-epidemic work, we do have our priorities. For industries or individuals who are hard hit, they would be given priority. And as such, we could not offer subsidies across the board. The retail industry is indeed affected. If the pandemic eases, they might see an upturn in fortunes. But I do agree with Mr. Tan. That's for certain industries, such as the retail industry. Can e-commerce be applied, or can they be upgraded? We have made available different funds, for example, the BUD fund or other funds relating to e-commerce. We have reinforced these funds. Your time is up, Secretary. Thank you. Mr. Lam Shi-yun. Thank you. I hope everyone is in good health, and I support this funding proposal to benefit people, and efficiency would be key. So in terms of fighting the epidemic, I hope we would all stand united for the benefit of Hong Kong. Yesterday, after reading the proposal, I received a lot of inquiries from people who believe they have been left out. and I try to explain the government's initiatives to them. So I hope the government can explore more options and try to speed up the application procedures. Some people were yet to secure reimbursements from the last round. Some people, including elderly people above the age of 65, they no longer hold an MPF account, and since the application procedures were too cumbersome, they were discouraged from applying. These retirees might not be covered this time. So I wonder whether the Financial Secretary would allocate some funding for the volunteers, for example, by giving them meal boxes or test kits. For affected industries, including premises ordered to close, such as shop selling, wedding gowns, etc., you are providing a rental subsidy, but now they don't even have a place to operate, and they have been left out by this latest round. Ms. Eunice Young talked about auditors. I declare that I am an auditor. For industries indirectly affected, such as professionals, for example, lawyers, auditors, we have been indirectly affected. You have created temporary posts, but for employers, these jobs might not be for them. So I hope you can consider creating some jobs for these people. In terms of the application threshold, procedures, etc., these could be fine-tuned. But I'd like to point out that for many programs or schemes, the funds could be dispersed efficiently. For new initiatives such as the temporary unemployment relief, some time is needed to process the applications. If adjustments are needed in the future, they could be funded by the contingency. I would invite the FSTV to answer the questions on the accounting profession. FSTV, please. I'd like to thank members for their questions about the accounting profession. The pandemic created difficulties in the flow of personnel between Hong Kong and the mainland, and that created challenges in compiling accounts and auditing reports. And as such, the Securities and Futures Commission announced that if companies face any difficulties, they can make an application with the Hong Kong EX. So it was announced in February 2020, and the flexible arrangement still applies as of now. Some members from the sector indicated that they might need more support, and as such we will maintain communication with the sector. Mr. Chang, thank you very much. We see that there were new breakthroughs in this latest round, and the funding levels have been doubled compared with the fifth round. In terms of offering rental waiver for public properties, I think more work is needed. Under the job creation scheme, 30,000 jobs will be created. Can you fill these posts as soon as possible? And could these posts help fight the pandemic? The subsidy level has been doubled, but unfortunately the daily caseload has also doubled in recent days, which is a scary thought. The media expect more than 11,000 people in the community waiting to be admitted to hospital. Are there or is there anything you can do about the isolation facilities? For instance, leasing holiday camps, unused hotels, or even cruise ships. So you should come up with a comprehensive isolation policy. So as things stand, our isolation facilities are lacking. Could private medical practitioners be engaged by the government to provide online consultation to confirm patients who are waiting to be admitted? That way we can have better treatment and diversion plans. I would invite the Civil Service Bureau to talk about the time-limited posts, and then I would defer to the Secretary for Food and Health. We will create another 30,000 time-limited jobs, and some of them are would be responsible for fighting the epidemic. So after the funding is approved, we will work with relevant policy bureaus to see the areas that would require more hands, and we would actively pursue the exercise. Food and Health Bureau. Currently, some confirmed cases are waiting to be admitted at home, and for this, the hospital authority and Department of Health have done a lot of work. First of all, we must move or transfer these patients to isolation facilities apart from Penny's Bay. As the Chief Executive said this morning, we are looking for more hotels to be converted into isolation facilities, and we are also looking at university hostels, public housing estates, etc. So at the end of the day, we must have sufficient isolation facilities, and we would also work on the transfer arrangements, and we must avoid creating any bottlenecks. For patients with mild symptoms, we would provide them with information while they are waiting at home. The HA announced the setting up of a new hotline, and an information kit will be provided, and designated taxi fleet can transfer these patients to 7 designated clinics in Hong Kong. And professional nurses would man the hotline in order to understand the situation of patients. Mr. Ng Ki Chong, Dr. Johnny Ng. I appreciate the 6th round of AEF because it answers people's needs as well as calls from legislators. We do not know when the pandemic would end, and the future is still very uncertain. So I think the government must think ahead. Many big restaurants are about to close down after the vaccine pass is implemented. The government must think of ways to allow retailers and restaurants to operate. I think many of them would prefer to be open for business instead of receiving subsidies from the government. this funding injection would tackle a number of imminent problems, but some people and businesses might be left out. So in the coming budget, the government can offer relief measures specifically to help the grassroots. Secretary? Thank you very much. The idea of the vaccine pass is to provide ease of mind for the public when the pandemic eases. So for details, I would defer to the Secretary for Food and Health. Thank you very much. As Mr. Yao suggested, once the pandemic stabilizes and premises reopen, the vaccine pass can help boost overall vaccination rate, which offers better protection for the public, and that would provide ease of mind for people entering these premises. Next, Mr. Michael Tian. Mr. Tian, please switch on your microphone. If not, next, Mr. Chu Kok Kang. Mr. Chu, please switch on your microphone. Thank you. I'd like to thank the government for heeding the advice of the Hong Kong Federation of Education Workers. The 6th AEF has helped education practitioners as well as introducing a deferred repayment arrangement. Lessons are unlikely to resume anytime soon. This round of AEF only provides a one-off relief grants for childcare centers, and this is certainly not enough. Privately operated kindergartens have faced an exodus of students, and at the same time, they are still paying very high rents. So inevitably, many would close down and lay off their staff. Hopefully, the government can provide regular subsidies to these operators. Each tutorial school would receive a one-off subsidy of $40,000. We believe a higher rate could be offered based on their scale and size. For schools offering interest classes such as STEM centers, piano schools, play groups, drawing schools, etc., they never benefited from the AEF at all. They would not enjoy any revenue when classes are suspended. Tutorial schools are receiving a subsidy while these schools get nothing. I urge the Chief Secretary's office to follow up immediately and provide a subsidy from $50,000 to $80,000. We urge the government to provide an anti-epidemic subsidy to all schools in Hong Kong amounting $30,000 to $50,000. That way, schools can purchase rapid test kits, anti-epidemic supplies, and hire more people to disinfect the campus. I would defer to the Education Bureau. For kindergartens, we are closely monitoring the pandemic, and in each round of the AEF, we have provided assistance to kindergartens. For tutorial schools, could the subsidy level be adjusted based on their scale and size? The EDB does not maintain details of on the operation of these schools, and as such, we believe a flat rate is appropriate. For these organizations or providers who are not registered with the EDB, they were not bound to suspend lessons. Our measures mainly target tutorial schools registered under the Education Ordinance who were ordered to close. The other providers were not included, but we have taken note of Mr. Chu's view.
If I may respond, for the interest class, I don't think you have been able to plug the gap. They suffer tremendously in the midst of COVID. Many of them are teetering on the brink of collapse. Why don't you offer them some allowance? This is being unfair to them. Time is up, Mr. Chu. Right, on the list are Alice Mack, Duncan Chiu, Yim Kong, Holden Chow, Lee Chen Kong, Tik Chi Yuen, Kennedy Wong, Becky Chan, Lau Man Kwong, Chen Cho Hung, Sunny Tan, and Miss Alice Mack, please. I'd like to say that we're grateful to the administration for taking on board the FTU's recommendations. I heard from the officials that for those who are unemployed, there will be allowance. For those who have their work suspended, they are not included. We have the SLW here. If people are put on no-pay leave, if they go on for a month, it would be tantamount to being sacked. Those who are on no-pay leave, they struggle as much as those who are out of a job. The fact that they have an employer there doesn't mean anything at all. I welcome the government's offer of support to the unemployed, but there are some who are put on no-pay leave. They're suffering just as much. I hope that the administration would know that not all employers would offer any minimum pay. Even for the beauty parlors, they're not offering any minimum pay to the workers. The employers have to shell out money to pay the rent and all the rest of it, so there is no minimum pay. If this scheme doesn't help them, what else is there to help them? Ms. Doris Ho said that there are other schemes that can help them. How can you help these people who are put on no-pay leave? Taxi drivers, offer them some allowance for the gas. You said that you run out of drivers for transferring the patients. You're thinking of the taxi drivers. The taxi drivers are making tremendous contribution. Why don't you offer them some assistance? Tourism trade, you're offering a few $1,000s to the practitioners. Is it anywhere near enough? The practitioners will have to put food on the table. I think you have to do something to alleviate their plight. Secretary, PICO first, and then THB. I'll be addressing the question about tourism in the end. Chairman, there are some workers who are put on no-pay leave. They still hold down a job. If their employers are putting them on no-pay leave, I'm sure that in the judgment of the employers, by the time COVID stabilizes, they can relaunch their business and the workers will get to work again. Like a catering, sorry, do they not have to put food on the table for the whole month that they are put on no-pay leave? Don't they have to pay the rent? When these kind of situations, we're helping the employers. We're offering some assistance to tide them over these challenging times, and hopefully by the time COVID stabilizes, they don't get paid at all. don't they have to eat? Well, Ms. Ho, you talked about other schemes. Is government considering other schemes to help these people? Well, I talked about the other schemes. I'm referring to the allowance for some sectors under this scheme, like the catering trade. We're offering assistance to the catering trade to tie them over these difficult periods for them to stay afloat. By the time COVID eases, the business can resume and the workers can get to work again. Chairman, I appreciate Ms. Ellis-Mack's sentiments. For these subsidies, we cannot satisfy the demand on an individual basis, but we have really revised the overall strategies. Where there were gaps, we tried to plug them at the very beginning. And in the course of our meeting, I think we said that we have to look at the whole basket of sectors, and we, other than the employers and the employees, we also offer subsidies to the frontline workers, like the tourism trade. This may not be enough for individual sectors. Now, some may say that they rather not get the allowance, they want to resume their work. I think with regard to these $27 billion plus the previous 5 rounds, the government is spending close to $200 billion for alleviation. Well, some people are unemployed, they don't get much in the way of protection. You have the 20% contingency. You might wish to consider this from the pool. Mr. Duncan Chiu, Chairman, thank you. For this AEF 6.0, I expressed my support. I'm grateful to the administration for heeding our views regarding the IT sector. They're experiencing a lot of difficulties. So Cyberport and the Science Park, they do enjoy some rental allowance. Now, there are many businesses in the Cyberport and the Science Park. They're struggling, and they're relying very much on the technology voucher scheme. I hope that the administration would get on with the scrutiny, the verification of the voucher scheme. Now, regarding the job creation, the $6.6 billion, many people in the tourism sector asked me about the possibility of switching over the IT sector. Now, other than dishing out the cash, will there be any training in the area of IT that can be provided to for people to reinvent themselves? I defer to the ITB. ITB. I heard what Mr. Chiu has to say at the Science Park and the Cyberport. We do have the rental reduction arrangement. We'll see how we can broaden the scope of the technology voucher scheme. In the AEF, we have the distant business, the DBIS program to help the business to get more contracts. And we can also help the SMEs to upgrade their abilities. This scheme incurred $1.9 billion in investment. We will be dispersing 30% to start with so that the enterprises can employ these IT companies and to pay for the operating expenses. I mentioned the technology voucher scheme, and this has gone down particularly well to the business. Each company will get as much as $0.6 million in subsidy. I appreciate the difficulties facing the startups as well as the rental reduction in the Science Park. In cyberport. We are supporting the enterprises in other areas for them to upgrade their business capability so that more people can stay in their jobs. Any follow-up, Mr. Chiu? No? Let's move on to the next speaker, Mr. Yim Gong. Mr. Yim, mic on, please. Chairman, thank you. The COVID is really very severe. It is unprecedented. Now, this scheme, this allocation is $27 billion. I support this. I think we have to do something about the capacity of the public hospitals. People are asked to stay at home and isolate themselves under the Stay Home Safe scheme. I share Mr. Chow Man Kong's ideas. We should create more facilities for quarantine purposes in order to cut off the transmission. There are some people who told me that there are some patients who suffer from mild symptoms who do not want to stay at home, and he's stay outside in the shopping mall. And I think we should fit these patients with a wristband to track them. The chief executive said that there are 3,000 public housing units that will be used for this purpose. I don't think it's enough. The government should accord high priority. The government should also roll out the electronic consumption voucher scheme to benefit more people. Mr. Yao said that 60% of the funding would disperse to individuals. If we can have the electronic consumption voucher scheme, I think there are many mainlanders who are working in Hong Kong. I hope that they will also stand to benefit as well. Secretary, we're not proposing to address the second part of the question. Perhaps an FHB might wish to supplement regarding the COVID situation. Chairman, thanks very much, Mr. Yim, for the comments. We are going full steam ahead to deal with the positive patients who are at home awaiting quarantine services. We have the Penny's Bay. As the chief executive said, we have hotels. We're identifying hostels in universities and public housing units. So we are sparing no effort in this area. Now, for those who are staying at home, those confirmed patients, how can we render our service to them? How can we disseminate the information to them? If they are of higher risk, like senior folks, the hospital authority will try their best to send them to the hospital as soon as possible. A moment ago, Mr. Yim referred to the stay home safe, home isolation. Now, these are not confirmed patients. These are the close contacts, and they're of a lower risk. So we're arranging them to not go to the Penny's Bay, and rather they would stay at home for isolation. They're not confirmed patients at all. So these are two different types of people altogether. And these people in isolation, we need to undergo RAT tests on a daily basis, and we do have 100 hotlines for them to call through with any particular questions. Mr. Yim, your time is up. Let me bring back Mr. Duncan Chiu. Duncan. Chairman, I failed to make the declaration. I'm on the board of the cyberport. Mr. Holden Chow. Holden, mic on, please. Right. I'll come back to you, Mr. Chow. Right, go ahead, please. I can't quite see you. The mic still off. Please turn on the mic. Mr. Chow? Am I coming through? Right, just turn on the mic. Go ahead, please. Go ahead, please. Thank you, Chairman. First of all, I'm grateful to the administration we meant to help the security guards and the cleaners who are contributing to the anti-pandemic work. Now I can see that they've been covered and they have very high risk of exposure. Under the Housing Authority, the security guards will stand to benefit, but there are others like the outsourced cleaners or security guards under the Hospital Authority may not be eligible for the $2,000 allowance because they are doing the same thing as far as the job nature is concerned. They're exposed to the same risk. I remember that they would get $6,000 per month. The taxi drivers have been struggling over the recent past. They should also be benefited. To plug the gaps, with the tightening of the social distancing measures, there are some food kiosks under the LCSD that have been closed, but there is no allowance given to them at all. Neither have they been supported in previous rounds of AEF. Would these gaps be plugged as well? Thank you. And Mr. Chow referred to the subvented organizations and the security guards. So would they be included? Perhaps the other question can be addressed by the FSTB and the THB. Thank you for the question. Under the scheme, the frontline cleaners and security guards are under the Housing Authority and Housing Society will be included. For the NGOs, they are not included. I think the government can set the example, can take the lead. Now these frontline workers have made a tremendous contribution to the anti-pandemic work, and with these examples, I hope that the other organizations at hospital can also follow suit. We would reflect the views to the Policy Bureau and for them to think about it. THB and HAB, any supplement? Any supplement there, please? Chairman, please. THB. Mr. Chow referred to $6,000 times 6 months. That was under the ESS, and there was a ripple effect arising from the ESS. Under the ESS, we were seeking to safeguard jobs, and there were some self-employed people where we have the $6,000 for 6 months, and this time this arrangement doesn't figure in this scheme. Mr. Peter Shiu. Well, I'm sure that we're going to be stopping until the 23rd. And different sectors have been struggling a great deal. The retail sector has not been suspended, but we don't have any evening dining service, and it is really as quiet as anything outside. In many retail businesses, they have seen a drop in business by 50% or even 70%. In this AEF, there is no proposal for the retail business. There is a whole chain of knock-on effect, and I hope that after 2 years of anti-epidemic effort, you want to safeguard jobs. I think you have to redouble your efforts. It's not a question of whether this fund will be approved. This would definitely be approved. I hope that you will have a 7.0 shortly.
So you should launch a ESS program for at least 3 months to help the various sectors to stay afloat. On the rental issue, now rent makes up a very large part of the expenditure. And I hope that the government can take the lead in exploring options to encourage landlords to reduce rental. Landlords may also face a cash flow problem. So can the FSTB talk to the HKMA to continue with the principal moratorium under the SME financing guarantee scheme? For micro enterprises and SMEs, the AEF would help, but for the medium-sized businesses, for beauty parlors and saunas, there is no tiered subsidy. I don't think it's fair. Now, about TUR, $10,000 will be given to the unemployed, but those taking leave without pay will not benefit. I don't think this is a precise measure. People have stopped working for 48 days already. Do you think that businesses will reopen easily? And if you don't support this group of workers, people will be full of grievances. For premises which have been ordered to suspend work, I wonder how many employers can continue to pay their staff without any business. So if we are not covering this group of workers under the TUR, you will be criticized heavily. We have heard Mr. Peter Show's views. He talked about the retail sector. We understand the situation. The retail sector has not been ordered to close. So for this round, we are focusing our efforts to help those who have been ordered to close. And we hope that through such assistance, the retail sector can also be rebound and revive. For subsidy to various businesses, in terms of the principal moratorium under the SME guaranteed financing scheme, 100% guaranteed products, the FS and the HKMA are discussing and exploring whether to continue with the program when it expires. Now, the government has also taken the lead in offering rental concessions for its premises, and we appeal to different sectors to offer the same concessions. And we noticed that the landlords, the major landlords, are changing the way the rental is being charged so that they can share out the burden as well. So I think we have conveyed a clear message to the landlords, and I hope that they can tide over the difficulties together with their tenants. Mr. Lee Chen-kang, Peter Show has talked about the principal moratorium under the SME guaranteed financing scheme. I think the government should do more. Well, now it stretches to 24 months of salary and rental before the application will be considered. Now, on subsidy for cinemas, hair salons, and beauty parlors, I know that there is a cap to the subsidy for the cinemas under the NEF. Well, there will be $100,000 for each screen, and there is a cap of $3 million for the cinema chains. But for major cinema groups, they have over a dozen cinemas, each with over 4 screens. And if there is a cap of $3 million, and that means that they can get only $210,000. So they can't even afford to pay the salary. Why are you imposing a cap on the subsidy? Are you being unfair to the major cinema chains? Do you want them to fold? And then secondly, many fellow members have referred to frontline drivers, bus drivers, minibus drivers, and taxi drivers. Their work nature is similar to that of the security and cleansing workers, and they have kept cleaning their car compartments to provide a safe and comfortable environment for their passengers. I hope that the government can also offer them a monthly subsidy of $2,000 for 5 months to drivers. So you can also offer a full fuel subsidy to them as well. Lastly, I would like to ask, will the administration consider launching the ESS again? Many fellow members have said that the 6.0 is marred with problems. If we don't have an 3-month ESS, a lot of businesses will wind up. I hope that you can respond. Let me respond to the question on cinemas before I turn over the time to THB to talk about drivers, and LDW can talk about ESS. The cinemas have been directly affected by our restriction measures, so we would like to give direct subsidy. While cinemas differ in their sizes, some of them are smaller, others are in chain operation. We would like to render support to the sector, but then indeed cinemas differ in their size, and if there is economy of scale in some cinema chains, the cost for each screen may differ. So we build on what we have done in the past. We impose a maximum or a cap of subsidy. Generally, I think our approach, given the finite resources, is appropriate. Can I defer to the THB to talk about drivers? Mr. Frank Chan, please. About professional drivers, they are in contact with a lot of people, and they are exposed to higher risk, and they are also cleaning up their car compartments. The FSTB made the proposal. We'll go back and talk to the FSTB on your suggestion. I think it's time up. Dr. Teck Ji-yun. Yes, Chairman. I'm sorry, you've gone over time. Dr. Teck Ji-yun. Chairman, thank you. Secretary. The government has come up with a proposal in such a short period for our consideration. I think we really appreciate it. And 60% of the $27 billion will be spent on supporting individuals. I think this is a very good approach, and we agree to that. And many fellow members are actually identifying some gaps under your scheme. Let me cite some examples. Within the social welfare sector, for RCHD and RCHE, they will be given a monthly subsidy of $2,000 for daycare services. And there are actually many services which are similar in nature to RCHD, RCHG. Will they be given subsidy? And for the beauty industry, they have made a number of requests. Now, the proposal is that there will be a subsidy of $30,000, $60,000, and $100,000 based on the size. Can you increase the amount? And for the beauty industry, there are a lot of self-employed people, can they be given a one-off subsidy? The sector is asking for a one-off subsidy of $30,000. And there are also upstream sectors, for example, beauty, equipment, product suppliers. They are not being assisted. Have you omitted them or missed them out? And a lot of members were talking about tourism sector, and the code. The tour code sector is asking for a special fund to be set up to help them to repair their car so that they can launch their business as soon as possible when the time is right. And then the exhibition convention industry is also asking for assistance. There are a lot of gaps here, so please talk to us more. And then fellow members have talked about the principal moratorium, or the pre-approved principal payout holiday scheme. The government will be thinking about extending the scheme so that the sector can be reassured. And then we have discussions on how we interpret the word unemployment. So a lot of people do not understand, how do you define people as temporarily unemployed? I think you have heeded our advice, but I hope that the government can explain more clearly the definition of unemployment here. Can I ask the LWB to talk about the issues in the welfare sector before I tackle the other questions? In drawing up the AEF 6.0, we have to set priorities, we have to draw a line. Now, in services for people, higher risks are involved and the workers are under greater pressure. So we treat them as priority groups. So we try to set priorities. We have heard the other suggestions made by Dr. Take. Well, there are two plans under the payout principal payment holiday scheme. The two schemes will expire by the end of April and June, respectively. We are now looking at these two schemes, and once there is any progress, we will report to the electrical and the public. Mr. Kennedy Wong. Thank you, Chairman. First, I believe that fellow members and the public have high expectations of AEF 6.0. If you ask people's views on the fifth wave and the feelings of the sentiments of the experts and the chief executive, they will tell you that this is the most severe outbreak over the past 2 years. So the impact on the various sectors is the greatest. How come that if this is the case, there is only $2.27 billion in the AEF 6.0? With all the different rounds added up, the amount is $200 billion. Now, the impact on various sectors is very great. Secretary, you talked about how Hong Kong has fared well in the past year. The unemployment rate is so very low. Well, this is history. You should be forward-looking. You should be mindful about the present environment, whether the environment will the environment worsen. Now, scheduled premises have been closed, and some of the operating hours have been shortened. A lot of our members and voters, they may import frozen food, dried seafood, and so on. Now, without all the Lunar New Year banquets, They are suffering great losses. Can they stay afloat, especially the SMEs? I urge the government to consider setting up a dedicated support fund for SMEs. There is a definition for SMEs in Hong Kong. I won't go into the details. And of course, I will fully support the AEF 6.0, but $27 billion is far from enough. I have another question for FHB. People panic seeing the situation in the past few days, and some Chinese proprietary medicine has been out of stock on the market. Should the government address concerns of Hong Kong people? How come that under the AEF, resources have not been allocated to procure Chinese proprietary medicine or Chinese medicine services, so that Hong Kong people can try to strengthen their preventive capability and so on? Why are we not doing that? I agree with Mr. Kennedy Wong saying that the outbreak is severe. This time we have devoted great efforts in the AEF 1.0. And when the outbreak was in January, we launched the fund in March. And then for this latest round, it took us 5 weeks to launch the AEF 6.0, and we are covering 67,000 businesses and 750,000 individuals, and we provide relief for them. These are the most needy individuals and enterprises. Well, within my work portfolio, last month, we dispersed another round of relief to the tourism sector. And prior to that, we have been doing a lot of relief work, including the support to SMEs, as mentioned by Mr. Kennedy Wong. Over the past 2 years, in the FSS budget and also other funds, money has been dispersed to the various sectors. So we know that there are inadequacies, but we will be all ears to members' suggestions. Given the limited time and space, we have done our utmost to roll out the relief measures. Ms. Maggie Chan. Thank you, Chairman. I support AEF 6.0. The direction is right. We try to safeguard jobs and help businesses and address people's immediate concerns. And Hong Kong people have told me that they would like to get the money as soon as possible, especially for relief to individuals. They hope strongly that the application procedures can be streamlined. For AEF 6.0, there is one thing that we should do more on. We should mobilize people, like what the government said. Maybe we can ask taxi drivers to help with the anti-epidemic work. They need to be subsidized. We can mobilize other people. For example, you can mobilize volunteers to help with fighting the epidemic. In page 14 of the paper, towards the bottom, it says that frontline workers with contribution to anti-epidemic work will be supported. How come you have missed the frontline volunteers? They are not asking for money. But I see that they don't have adequate PPE, and at the same time, they are trying to help maintain the order. They are even procuring their own loudspeakers. These people are selfless in helping out. And for micro enterprises and SMEs, well, a number of members have mentioned about this. Can you launch the ESS? And you should launch ESS dedicated to the SMEs, lasting for 6 months, and you should cover people who are underemployed, who are on no pay leave, and etc. And the employers have to declare, if they receive the subsidy, that all the money has been spent on staff salaries.
Secretary, thank you very much for the view. Like I said, I appreciate the contributions of the volunteers, and I thank them for their selfless contributions. And this is something that goes beyond money. They are not looking for money. But did you ever visit the districts? There's a lack of supplies, including clothing. They are not going after the money, but you should at least express your gratitude or appreciation. I would invite the Home Affairs Bureau to offer their views. Such arrangements must be based on the epidemic control needs. I would see if the FHB or HAB have anything to add about the supplies or equipment. Am I coming through? Chairman? On behalf of the Home Affairs Bureau, I'd like to thank our staff and volunteers for their heartfelt contributions. Many volunteers reach out to us to offer help, and we would certainly give them proper protection since they are all part of the family. Wherever they go, they would be given sufficient equipment, and if necessary, they would be given PPE, face masks, hand rub, etc. So our volunteers are always properly equipped, and we constantly remind them to look after themselves. Your time's up. Next, the time is now 6 p.m. Are we going to proceed to an open vote? If that happens, since our system is not ready, we would need to tally the votes manually, and it would take at least 30 minutes. I asked this question before, and no member indicated that they request an open vote. Does anyone request such a vote? So if so, you may indicate your wishes in the chat box. If not, I would allow other members to speak. So I assume there are no such requests, so members could speak. We would proceed to a vote by about 6:30 p.m. Mr. Leung Kwang. Thank you. I support the government's AEF 6.0 proposal to support businesses and individuals. I do have a few suggestions. For workers working for small contractors, we are not talking about construction workers working for the big companies. They might work for companies that take up minor works, and very often they have very limited savings and they are on the verge of unemployment. So in terms of the temporary unemployment relief, how would they know whether they are eligible? Or would you be as lenient as you can in order to help these workers? As you know, lots of renovation works and building works have been affected as a result of the pandemic. At Fa Yun Street, Temple Street, some store owners told me that they support the government's call to go out less, and dine-in services have been banned in the evening, and that would affect the business of these street stores. In previous rounds of AEF support was offered, and the funding amounted to about $62 million. And in this latest round of AEF, about $2 billion has been set aside as a contingency. So can you allocate about $20 million to help these people, even if the owners do not receive a salaries, they still have to pay fixed costs. So at times they make less than $100 of revenue in a day. So they are in a very bad shape. So if the government can allocate some $20 million to help them, that would be helpful. For the minor works, I would defer to the Development Bureau, and for the stores, street stores, I would invite the FHB to respond. Chairman. For the temporary unemployment relief, I believe the definition of unemployment is not established by our Bureau. I think it is up to PICO. Does PICO have anything to add? If not, the FHB can talk about the street stores. FHB, please. I invite the Director of FEH to talk about the street stores. For the fixed pitch hawkers and mobile hawkers, they were not included in this latest round of AEF, but they have enjoyed waivers to the license fees. The waivers were put in place from November 2019 till March this year. Their license fees would be waived during this whole period. Mr. Sunny Ten, please switch on your microphone. Thank you. I support the proposal of AEF 6.0. Hong Kong is at a very difficult time. The government should be more compassionate in processing the applications in order to help more people. In terms of the temporary unemployment relief, applicants must submit MPF account information. So a lot of people told us that for casual workers and those above the age of 65, they have, they had difficulties producing the proof. So we hope the government can explain the situation more clearly and be more lenient in processing the applications. If applicants make $30,000 or more before unemployment, they would not be eligible. But in some cases, either the husband or wife is the main breadwinner. So in that case, can you raise the $30,000 threshold to help these families? Apart from the AEF, we hope the government and financial secretary can consider offering a $10,000 consumption voucher again, since the AEF still does not cover certain individuals and businesses. So hopefully they can benefit through another round of consumption vouchers. In the industrial and commercial sectors, we are looking at tens of thousands of employers. Some members talked about an employment support scheme to help businesses and the industries. They have suffered for a long time already, and many might close down very soon. So hopefully this can benefit them. For ESS and consumption vouchers, I have heard your views. As for the unemployment relief, I would see if PICO has anything to add. Mr. Tan mentioned 2 points. For applicants without an MPF account, we would not reject the applications just because they don't have an MPF account. Mr. Tan talked about the $30,000 threshold. It refers to personal income instead of household income. So this is already a lenient approach. That is to allow applications on an individual basis. I think this threshold covers 3/4 of all employees. Any follow-up questions, Mr. Tan? If not, Ms. Judy Chen. Thank you. I'd like to thank the government for heeding the recommendation of the New People's Party, and they have been swift in rolling out AEF 6.0. I have some questions over the temporary unemployment relief. Applicants must be unemployed for at least a month to be eligible. But as we often see, many employers are working extremely hard just to survive, but the future doesn't look so rosy for them because of COVID-19, and we expect more businesses to fold very soon. If the government draws a line in March, and employers might lay off staff by the end of this month, so in that case, would these employees be made ineligible since they have not been unemployed for more than 1 month? And can you clarify the definition of unemployment? Are you specifically referring to people who are dismissed, or would people who resign of their own accord be eligible? We received a lot of cases seeking assistance. There was a mother with a child with special education needs. Since class has been suspended, the child has to stay home 24 hours a day, and even the domestic helper could not take care of the child. So the mother had no choice but to quit her job to take care of her child at home. I think this is just the tip of an iceberg. There were plenty of cases in which working mothers were forced to quit their jobs. So would they be covered? In the past 2 years or so, taxi drivers had to be tested regularly. Their business might be limited, and they had to pay rent, and apparently they are not receiving a lot of support in this round. So hopefully the government can provide them with better assistance. Mr. Yao said the taxi trade has been very supportive, but the fact remains that the taxi trade has suffered heavily. However, many of them are unable to take out bank loans, and hopefully the government can provide a reinstatement assistance to them. You have 10 seconds. Chairman. In terms of defining the period of unemployment, it depends on the moment in which an application is made. So the applicant must be unemployed for a month before the application is made. So it depends on the date in which an application is submitted. If the applicant has been unemployed for 1 month, then he or she is eligible. Time is limited, so can you finish up? We would consider exceptional circumstances if needed. I would read out the names of the 4 members: Rock, Chan, Lam So Wai, Elizabeth Kwok, Lai Tong Kwok, Ms. Elizabeth Kwok. Thank you. First of all, I'd like to thank the government for accepting the proposal of the DAB, in particular the temporary unemployment relief. I hope PICO should not dwell too much over the definition of unemployment. So for those who have no income, for instance, those who are still in a job but are not receiving any pay, they are basically unemployed. Our thinking is to help people and families and individuals who have no income. For businesses ordered to close, the government should provide better support to the relevant upstream and downstream businesses. For example, the dishware, washing, and laundry trades have been affected, or the wedding trade. Their upstream and downstream industries have been affected as well, so they should be considered by the government. For taxi drivers and SMEs, they deserve support from the government as well. Earlier, DAB members talked about Chinese medicine products. Some smaller Chinese medicine clinics told me that they lost a lot of business in recent months, and in recent months, few people are seeing a doctor. There is experience on the mainland on the use of Chinese medicine products to fight COVID. So for Chinese medicine products approved by the mainland authorities, they were all sold out in the market. And on behalf of Mr. Stephen Ho, the supply of chickens has been suspended for a few days already, and if this continues, the supply of chickens in the market would be exhausted. And a lot of IT companies lost a lot of business as well, so hopefully the technology voucher scheme could be approved soon. And for cleaners working in university hostels, are they excluded from the support measures? All these should be addressed by the government, and hopefully the consumption vouchers could be launched again. I thank Ms. Kwok for her views. Some of them had been addressed before, so we would consider these views altogether. for the self-employed working in tutorial schools or massage parlors, they have been excluded in this round. So hopefully the government can consider their interests. Hopefully we can take care of people who have lost their income. Next, Mr. Rock Chan. Thank you. Many of my questions and views had been mentioned by other members already. The government took the lead in offering rental concessions, which is a very good move for landlords offering a rent concession for tenants. Would tax concessions be offered by the government, or would the government give them a direct subsidy? That way, more landlords would have the incentive to offer rental concession to their tenants. And Mr. Yao talked about the ESS, but I like to say, I like to relay the views of the SMEs and micro enterprises. Many owners told me that they are doing their math 2 years on. If they face another year of hardship, they might not be able to stay afloat. So can the Labor and Welfare Bureau consider subsidizing the SMEs and micro enterprises so that they can pay the wages? Well, so that means refining the ESS.
FSTB, about the tax concessions. Thanks very much, Mr. Chen, for the comments. I think we are not really talking about the tax concessions. The government has a lot of properties as well, and there is rent concession up to 75% up to March this year. In the private sector market, I mean, we are setting a good example. We are taking the lead, and we've been urging the private sector to have regard to the COVID situation and offer some rental concession to the tenants. Rental is a part of the overheads, and there are other overheads as well, like rates, business registration, the water tariff, and the waste effluent charges, and so on. So during COVID, we should roll out measures to alleviate the plight of the MSMEs. Right? LWB, any response? LWB, please. Sorry, my mic was off a moment ago. Let me supplement in brief. We didn't consider the employment support scheme. However, we will monitor the development of the pandemic and see how we can help people in the community. Ms. Connie Lam. Please turn on the mic. Chairman, thank you. The government is rolling out these $27 billion worth of AEF 6.0. I welcome that, and I'm glad that the government has launched this temporary unemployment relief of $10,000, and this is offering immediate help. Now, if I may be a little bit critical, there are some premises that have been closed. Further upstream, the wholesalers, the SMEs, some of them have been left out. I've met the beauty industry, and they have, because of the closure of the premises, their equipment and their personnel have not received any subsidy, and they are close to closing down. And by the time they reopen, they may face the problems of supplies disruption. And will the administration be subsidizing the SMEs involved in the supplies of equipment and food and so on? Now, for the SME 100% loan guarantee and the principal payment holiday scheme, the scheme will be expiring in April. Will the government be extending the schemes to instill better confidence in the SMEs? Also, for the self-employed people, I'm glad that in this 6.0 scheme, the self-employed people will get subsidies. But I hope that the HAD or the relevant departments will endeavor to vet the applications from these self-employed people in such a way that will be flexible. Finally, I hope that this AEF 6.0 will tie in with the budget and offer more assistance, and hope that consumption voucher scheme or cash to the tune of $10,000 will be offered in the budget. Secretary, Ms. Lam mentioned something about the budget. I'm sure that the FSTB will convey the message. As regards further upstream, I appreciate that we may not be able to cover every single sector. There may be some business that marginal, and we're seeking to offer assistance to those who are directly hit and those that are closed because of COVID and the social distancing measures. We'd like to offer as much help as possible to them. Now, Ms. Lam referred to the principal payment holiday. One of the schemes involve the banking sector. I'm sure the FSTB will deal with that. The 100% loan guarantee, I think we have to work out the sum to see whether there would be any implications on the funding. This involves about $80 billion of funding. I think we have to work out the sum, and we've heard members' views, and we'll do something about it. Mr. Lai Tong Kwok, last speaker, 4 minutes, please. Chairman, thank you. First of all, I'm going to be voting in favor of this funding proposal, and I hope that the PICO will consider my comments. I don't think PICO has got the main thrust of Ms. Judy Chen's question. Those who got sacked in February will not be eligible. Unemployment is getting serious. In March and April, the situation is going to be infinitely worse than that in February. For some employers, some might keep the workers on until February. I think the application period should be extended. I'm not saying that you should extend the approval process. You should consider the application as soon as they come in. Also, the eligibility. There are many jobs that offer very low minimum pay, and they live on the commission. Like the beauty industry, they have been ordered to close, and these workers are on minimum pay. How can they survive on this minimum pay? Are you asking the employers to sack them so that they would be eligible for the temporary unemployment benefits? It doesn't quite make sense. Also, third, I'd like to say something for the drivers. I'm talking about the coach drivers. They are getting $5,000. If they get sacked today, they'll be eligible for $10,000. How fair can that be? The government's offering subsidies to the tune of $10,000 overall. Why is it that the coach drivers and the practitioners will not be offered subsidy up to that level of $10,000? Pickle? Right, I heard your comments. Pickle? Now, the 3-week application period we would have regard to the evolving COVID situation. If need be, we will be prepared to extend the application period. I hope you will consider extending the application period. Right, I heard what you said. We'll consider that. THB, any particular response to Mr. Lai's second question? THB, please. Chairman, coach drivers. This is the Tourism Commission's work. We've heard your comments, Mr. Lai. Right, in terms of the tourism sector, prior to this 6.0, less than a month or so ago, we've done the 5th round, and in this exercise, we're doubling the amount. I know that the tourism sector is struggling, so we have offered them a lot more rounds. Yes, indeed, you have disbursed a lot of money to the tourism sector, but you're paying the employers. I'm seeking to have a better deal for the employees. The employers have to pay everything in terms of overheads. In previous rounds, we have offered assistance to the travel agents and also the practitioners, tourist guide, tour escort, and coach drivers. So in the previous rounds, in answer to Mr. Lai's question, they did benefit from the assistance. Here, there are 2 rounds of subsidy for the tourism sector. Right, we've been here since 2 o'clock. It's now 6:30. There are 50-odd members who have already put questions. I hope that the administration will be collating the views. We have provided a lot of good insight. We are conveying a lot of views from the members of the public. We are the voice of the public. I hope that if you have further proposals, welcome to come back again to the Finance Committee. Now we are putting the proposal to the vote. Will please switch to gallery view. Members who are not part of the Finance Committee are welcome to put questions. So I'd like to remind members that those who are non-members, please do not vote. When you vote, please show your face and your hand in front of the camera. I call upon those in favor to raise their hands, and please do not put your hands down until you're told to do so. I now put paper FCR 2021-22-82 to the vote. With those in favor of the proposal, please raise their hands. All right. Please put down your hands. Those against, hands up, please. I don't see anybody in opposition. Those abstaining? No. No member abstaining. I think the members voting are in favor, the majority are in favor of the proposal. The meeting is now adjourned. The next meeting will be scheduled on the 25th of February. And also on the 24th of February at 11 a.m. we will be hearing a briefing of the budget for 2022-23. Thank you all very much for coming.